Hey guys, welcome back. You know the drill by now. New day, new cards. Let's get started. I'm going to start with a new legendary champion for Paladin. This card's awesome. It's called High Priest Theckal. It costs 3 mana, has 3 attack and 4 health. We've talked about this stat line before. It's a good stat line on a 3 mana minion. It's the kind of stat line where you can play it without being too fussed about actually the effect, but the effect is also really good. So the battle cries convert all but one of your hero's health into armor. So what this means is it kind of doesn't do anything, because what it does is it reduces your health to 1, and however much health has been reduced then gets added to you in armor. So your life total stays the same, but you're swapping life for armor. So if you're at 30 health, you will go down to 1 health and then add 29 armor. So, but what that means is it doesn't do anything initially, but what it means is that you have now got a really high ceiling of health that you can heal into. So I talked yesterday about some of the Paladin cards, Zandalari the Templar, for example. I said that it's quite difficult to heal in the early game. Let's say you play Benevolent Djinn on turn 3. Often you might get 1 or 2 health healed to your hero, and then if it goes off 2 or 3 times, you don't actually need that 3 health. Well, now in this instance, if you do get to play this on turn 3, every single one of your heal cards will work. They will count towards the cards such as Zandalari the Templar. So a really good card that pushes Paladin towards control Paladin. I'm so happy that Blizzard is doing this. We're moving away from the aggro Paladin. I mean, we're maybe not moving away. I think Odd Paladin could still be a strong deck, but what I mean is it's nice to have a really kind of good alternative. And this gives Paladin an opportunity to go above 30 health. So in the past, really you had a couple of options to gain armor, but mainly it was Uther, and that only gave you 5 armor. So you'd have a maximum of 35 health that you could get to. Well, now with this card, you can get to almost 60 health with your additional armor. And that really puts Paladin, particularly control Paladin, in a completely different area. So it helps against druids. So if anyone's playing a combo deck against you, so Malygos Druid I'm thinking about specifically, you can gain your health, get up to out of range of their combo, and then I think it's really hard for them to finish you off, because OTK Paladin against Druid was often a really interesting match, because it just really depended on when you got your healing and when they got their combos ready. But now if you can do this, you can outlive their combo, and then because the OTK Paladin combo is a little bit longer, takes a little bit longer to set up, you'll eventually get there and you'll kill the druids. Doesn't matter how much armor they've gained, you will kill them with your OTK. High fatigue games, you can compete with Warrior in those kind of high fatigue games. It has loads of really cool implications with cards such as Alexstrasza, so you could play this. If you don't get to play this on turn 3, it won't be as good, but you could still play this late game. Even if you had sort of 20 health, 15 health, and you played this, you gained a bunch of armor, and then the next turn you play Alexstrasza, you can gain 15 health, which makes a huge difference towards the end of the game. I'm also keen to see how it works with the Pearl Spellstone, because Paladin actually had the worst one in the set in my opinion, but it is really powerful. It only costs 2 mana, and you can, if you upgrade it enough, you can summon a 6/6. So with this card, it's able to do that, and I think potentially we could see the Spellstone, the Pearl Spellstone, come back into the game. The only issue is it is a legendary, so getting this in your opening hand is going to be hard, although with Kaliseth we've seen that it seems to happen quite often. So a great card pushing Paladin in exactly the direction that I want it to go in. Next, let's take a look at some rogue cards, and this first one's called Gurubashi Heitmann. It's an epic card. It costs 7 mana, has 5 attacks, 7 health, so weak stats for that mana cost. But it does have the battle cry of discover a 1/1 copy of a battle cry minion, and it costs 1. So you get this 1 cost card in your hand that you can play with a battle cry. Pretty decent, potentially. Unfortunately, I think it's got a much higher potential to be bad than it has to be good, because there are so many battle cries in the game. Loads and loads of battle cries in the game. Don't forget that this does work with the spirit, so if you've got the spirit on the board, then you can get the battle cry twice, which is another positive for this card. Not only do you discover 2, but then the other 2 that you play will potentially be able to have the battle cry trigger twice as well. But let's just take a look at some of the battle cries for Rogue, and if when you're discovering a card, there is a chance to get neutral battle cries as well, but there is a higher chance to get a rogue one. So you're more likely to get a rogue one. But you wouldn't want Shiny Finder. Lab Recruiter could be okay, but you wouldn't be that great. Pogo Hopper would be fantastic, especially if you're playing an actual Pogo Hopper deck. But the chances of, you can't plan to get these cards. You get to pick 3, so could be a good chance, but it's not going to happen every time, so you can't build that. Lash is bad. Blink Fox would be great. Faldori Strider would be great, but again slow. Test Greymane could be great depending on the deck you're playing. Myra Rotspring would be okay. But then when you look at how many, I'm not going to go through these, but look at how many neutral battle cries there are, and often the battle cries are quite specific. So Oakheart, maybe depending on how you've built your deck, it could work, but you can't plan to get Oakheart. Bone Mare is just a neutral one that would be fantastic. Primordial Drake would be good. Alex Straza could be good, but there are so many bad ones. And it's so hard to build your deck to plan on getting one of these. So an interesting card. I really like the concept of it. I think it's cool. But Rogue already has Sonya Shadow Dancer, for example. So I think if you were planning on playing that deck, Sonya Shadow Dancer would just be better, because then you can put minions in your deck that you want to have the battle cry from. It is harder to get them to work because you do need to have Sonya on the board and then kill that battle cry minion to get it back into your hand. But I think it's probably better than playing this card. Next up is a spell for Rogue. It costs 4 mana and it's called Walk the Plank, and it destroys an undamaged minion. So Rogue already has Assassinate, which costs 5 mana. That isn't played anymore. It's just too expensive for what it is, because they also released the Vilespine Slayer, which gets a 3/4 body with an Assassinate. So that is much better card, but that will be rotating out soon. So Walk the Plank could potentially be another option. It only costs 4 mana, and 4 mana to kill any minion could be okay, but it's not as good as a Vilespine Slayer. Vilespine Slayer costs 5, but getting that 3/4 body with the card as well just really creates a big tempo swing. When your opponent plays a Lich King and then you can just Vilespine it, you get a 3/4 on the board and then they lose their Lich King. So Walk the Plank has a good effect and only costs 4 mana. Maybe it will be good when a Vilespine rotates out, but I don't really see too much use for it until then. The undamaged minion thing is a bit strange. So if the minion's damaged, you can't use it. We haven't really seen that in Rogue that much, but I don't know whether that will hamper it too much. I don't think it will be too much of an issue, but I think you would play this over Assassinate is what I'm trying to say, but not until Vilespine rotates out, I don't think. Next up is a common neutral minion called the Rabble Bouncer. This costs 7 mana, has 2 attack and 7 health, so a terrible card if you're playing this at 7 mana. It's got a similar effect as the Corridor Creeper, except this one's got Taunt, of course, remember. But it costs 1 less for each enemy minion that's on the board. So whereas Corridor Creeper had 2 less health, but costs 1 less for each minion that died, it counts for your minions that died and your opponent's minion. You could very easily play a Corridor Creeper for 0 mana. And even though Corridor Creeper got nerfed, you can still play it in an evolved Shaman deck. This card, however, is just not good enough in my opinion. It's clearly designed to be really strong against aggro, so this is great if your opponent's got 4 minions on the board and you can play this for 3 mana. 3 mana 2/7 with Taunt is great. It helps to prevent those kind of really getting overpowered by aggro. But the issue here is that it only has 2 attack. So aggro decks could probably trade into it quite easily without their minions dying. There are a lot of minions that would die to 2 attack, but I think 3 attack would be better. And if you're not playing, if you put this in your deck and you come up in a control matchup or some kind of mid-range matchup, it's just not going to be strong enough. You're more than often going to be playing this for 6 mana 2/7 with Taunt, which isn't great, I don't think. So could have very specific uses against aggro decks, but I don't see it being good. Another neutral card here called Soup Vendor. It's rare, it costs 2 mana, has 1 attack and 4 health. So the stats are quite good for 2 mana. Whenever you restore 3 or more health to your hero, draw a card. So this has a good effect. It looks like another card that you could potentially put into a heal Paladin deck, because if you play this on turn 2, then you are likely to it will likely survive at least 1 turn. So then, can you restore 3 health to your hero? Benevolent Djinn, you could do that on turn 3, and then you get a card if your hero's already been damaged. So it has a really good effect. I don't really see this being good though. Like, if you played this 2 mana 1/4, okay, the stats are alright. It kind of trades well into Odd Paladin's little dudes. But outside of that, I don't think it's that great, because your opponent can probably trade into it without their minions dying. So only in very specific heal decks would you put this in. It could be a good card in the right deck, I just don't really see a space for it. Next up is the Masked Contender, which is an epic card. Costs 3 mana, it's 2 attack and 4 health. It has the battle cry of, if you control a secret, play a secret from your deck. This card's pretty good, I think. You would put this into a Secret Hunter, potentially, if there's space, because Secret Hunter is already a really good deck, actually. But the problem with secrets, especially in Hunter, is they only cost 2 mana. So late in the game, you really don't want to be drawing them, because the top decking a 2 mana secret that you can just play just isn't that great. So if you've already played a secret and then you play the Masked Contender, it takes a card out of your deck. So not only will you not top deck that anymore, you are more likely to top deck better cards, and plays it onto the board. 3 mana 2/4 stats aren't that great, but if you do manage to get a 2 mana secret out there as well, then I think it would be worth playing. And that's kind of the reason why Subject 9 is so powerful, is at a certain point in the game you can draw a bunch of secrets so that you're no longer worrying about top decking them. And this kind of has a similar kind of effect. I think anything that plays something from your deck is usually quite good. And the stats aren't that bad for this. Weaker than normal, 2/4, but you could potentially play this in a Secret Hunter. If you played it in Mage, then you get even more value, because of course the Mage secrets cost 3. So again, a pretty decent place to put it. I don't really see Mage wanting to play this though at the moment in the current kind of decks, but maybe in the future. But a nice little card that all kinds of secret decks will be considering putting in. Speaking of Mage, this next card is called Blast Wave. It costs 5 mana, is epic spell, and it deals 2 damage to all minions, and it also has Overkill. Add a random Mage spell to your hand. I don't think this card is very good. I don't think 2 damage to all minions for 5 mana is enough. For 6 mana you can play Blizzard, but it freezes the minions as well, which is often the really important effect of playing Blizzard. Blast Wave could be really good against aggro. It's a nice kind of turn 5 play to use, but I think Dragon's Fury could be better. That will of course rotate out, so potentially Blast Wave can fill that gap. But at the moment I don't really see it being that good. Of course, we've seen some new spell damage cards introduced into Mage, so if you could play this with spell damage, so if you have spell damage +2 on the board, then it's great. 5 mana, deal 4 damage to all minions. It does impact your own minions as well though, it's not just your opponent's minions. And unless you're playing it with spell damage, on turn 5 it's going to be very difficult to get the Overkill to actually work, because you need to have a 1 health minion on the board. But I suppose you could put your own 1 health minion on the board, because it does deal 2 damage to all minions to get it to work. So it's always nice for Mage to have more board clears. I think that's kind of a good direction for them to go in. They need some more control spells. This one isn't good enough, I don't think, unless you manage to get it to work with spell damage. Moving on to Shaman, we have a pretty nice card here. It's called Lick Him. It's a frog that kind of licks, or a toad. It's a weapon that's cost 2 mana, has 1 attack and 3 durability. So let's just say the card was this. It's okay. I doubt anyone would really play it, but 2 mana to have a 1/3 weapon can be quite good with Shaman, just to do that one little chip damage to your opponent's minions before you can do some kind of AoE. But it does have the +2 attack while you have overloaded mana crystals. So a 2 mana 3/3 weapon is fantastic. It really, really good. But can you make this work? Yes, you can, because Shaman has loads of overload cards, but is it good? I don't think so right now. It feels like this would be more of a control Shaman type card, where you're not too worried about overloading your mana crystals initially, because what you're doing is you're playing lots of cheap spells, and Shaman does have some pretty cheap spells, as like Volcanic Burst, Lightning Bolt, Zap, Beaked Lightning. They all cost 1 or less mana and they will overload. So you can actually use those kind of spells to make this work, and also control the board in the early game. The downside, of course, is you overload your mana crystals. So there are cards to support that though, and I've not played much Overload Shaman because for a long time it's not really been worthwhile. But maybe if they introduce a couple new cards, one like Lickham will definitely be... I mean, if you're playing an Overload deck, I think you would put this in. Otherwise, I don't think you would, because if you're just playing Lightning Storm and Volcano, it's just not enough spells to make this worthwhile, I don't think. Next, we have the Amani Warbear. It costs 7 mana, 5 attack, 7 health. It is a beast, which is probably quite important. It has Rush and Taunt. Not a good card, in my opinion. I don't think this is very good. I mean, the Rush actually could make it quite viable, because Rush is just always quite a nice thing to have on there. But if you're playing this for 7 mana and only dealing 5 damage to something, are you going to be able to kill it on turn 7? I don't think so. But because it's a beast, it obviously has lots of other beast synergies. It being Rush, it's quite nice to come out of any kind of recruit mechanism. So Hunter does that a lot, because then you can recruit it and rush in the same turn, and potentially it will protect some of your other minions because it still has Taunt. So it's not terrible, but I don't think it's that good. I suppose it is worth noting that you could potentially buff it with the Untamed Beastmaster and give it +2/+2. And actually, Eric in my comments yesterday mentioned that with Untamed Beastmaster, you could potentially in Druid use the Juicy Psych Melon. And Juicy Psych Melon, if you've got Untamed Beastmaster and you play Juicy Psych Melon, then it's good to have a 7 mana beast that you can buff, because you'll draw it in the same turn. So some potential uses, but I don't see it being strong enough. Now let's take a look at a Hunter card, which is probably the most powerful card of the day. It's called Revenge of the Wild. It only costs 2 mana, it's a spell, and the effect is insane. Summon your beast that died this turn. So for 2 mana, you can summon any beasts that died that turn. So let's just say you only have 1 beast on the board, and you trade it in and then play 2 mana to get it back. If that beast costs 3 mana or more, then you're already getting a really, really strong tempo play. But when you think of some of the insane things that Hunter's already doing with beasts, this is incredible. Like King Crush, if you got King Crush out of your Katharina, you trade King Crush it in to a big minion, then you play Revenge of the Wild, you get King Crush back again, and with Charge. Charge Devil Saw works exactly the same. Witchwood Grizzly would be ridiculous. You can play your Witchwood Grizzly out even if it had relatively low health. Then hopefully on your turn, if you can trade it in, you just bring it back and it's got the full stats. So many really good possibilities here. We've seen lots of new beasts. The lowers a beast, for example. I mean, we haven't seen the Hunter lower yet, so it may not be a beast, but a lot of them are. It just seems so good. Flark's Boomzooka, which was a terrible card in the previous expansion, well, if you have a deck just full of beasts, you could play Flark's Boomzooka. They trade into your opponent's minions, die, then you play Revenge of the Wild and bring them all back. That's some really specific kind of possibilities. I still don't think Boomzooka would be that great. It seems like a little bit difficult to work for me, but Revenge of the Wild will be fantastic. I don't see many decks that you won't put this in. Death Rattle Hunter is probably the best Hunter deck at the moment. That, however, is playing Prince Kaliseth, so that means that you can't play this. But will it be strong enough to drop Prince Kaliseth? Maybe. I think it really is good. You could put 2 copies of this in, and you very regularly going to be able to bring back some big beasts or a lot of small beasts. So really decent. And Kaliseth rotates out soon anyway. So man, I don't know. I think this might be too powerful. What do you guys think? Alright guys, that's all the cards for today. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in the next video tomorrow. Until then, I'll see you next time.